The story of Moses. It's one of the most epic tales in all of history, right? A huge saga of slavery, liberation, and the birth of a nation. It's a story most of us feel like we know inside and out. But what if there's a completely different story hiding there, right in plain sight?
Okay, let's just dive right in, because this is where it gets really fascinating. What if this grand, sweeping story of a people's exodus is actually a microscopic, deeply personal epic that every single one of us has already lived through? So, we're going to explore a pretty stunning metaphorical interpretation of Exodus, one that recasts this ancient journey as the universal story of human life itself, from conception through gestation all the way to the dramatic moment of birth.
Let's start right where all of our stories begin. The incredible, almost impossible journey to conception. This is where the first parallels start to line up with, well, startling clarity. Think about the very beginning of Moses' life. Pharaoh orders that all newborn Hebrew boys must be killed. It's a brutal mass elimination. Metaphorically, this is an incredible parallel to the millions of sperm that start the journey but never ever reach their destination. Moses, saved by that little basket, becomes the one survivor, the chosen one, destined to carry the story forward. And you see Moses on the solo journey down the Nile River. He's floating along, guided by fate, heading towards a very specific destination. It's such a striking image, and it's almost a perfect mirror of a single sperm's journey through the fallopian tube, driven by this powerful biological need toward its one and only goal. So where does Moses' journey on the river end? At Pharaoh's palace. He's taken in, and he enters this world of total protection and nourishment. In our metaphor, the palace is the egg. It's that safe, nurturing space where fertilization happens and where a new life can kickstart its incredible transformation. Okay, so fertilization has occurred. The journey now moves inward, into the hidden, developing world of the womb. This next phase is all about gestation, the 9 months where the foundations of identity and consciousness are first laid down. You know, the event that truly defines Moses' entire life is the burning bush. That's where he gets his divine mission. Metaphorically, this is such a powerful moment. It represents the very first spark of consciousness in a developing fetus. Not a voice from a bush, of course, but the first neural signals firing up, that dawning of awareness that separates me from not me.
And that development gets really complex really fast. Later on, Moses goes up Mount Sinai and receives the 10 Commandments, this foundational set of laws that will give structure to an entire society. Well, this is a beautiful mirror for the explosive growth of synapses in a fetal grain. These connections are literally forming the architecture of our minds, creating the rules, the identity, and the functions that make us who we are.
Now, a specific number pops up again and again in this story: 40 days and 40 nights on the mountain, and 40 years wandering in the wilderness. Let's just focus on that number for a second. 40. And here, the parallel is it's incredible. The Israelites' 40 years of wandering in the desert, this long period of growth and preparation before they can enter a new world, corresponds almost perfectly to the 40 weeks of human pregnancy. Both are a necessary time of maturation before a new life can truly begin.
With development almost complete, we finally arrive at the most dramatic, the most dangerous, and the most transformative part of the whole story, the Great Escape, which, in our metaphor, is the physical act of birth itself. The 10 plagues of Egypt. They're terrifying, they're relentless. And according to this whole idea, they serve a very specific metaphorical purpose. The escalating horror of the plagues directly mirrors the building intensity of a mother's labor contractions.
Just look at the progression. It starts with discomfort, water to blood, frogs, and it just builds from there. The plagues get worse and worse just as labor pains become more frequent and more intense. Pharaoh's stubborn refusal to let the people go, that's like the body's own struggle during labor. And that final, most terrible plague, the death of the firstborn, that represents the absolute peak of that struggle, the final agonizing push just before delivery.
And then, the miracle, the climax. Moses parts the Red Sea.
The waters literally break open, creating this narrow passage for the Israelites to escape through. This is the moment of birth. The parting of the sea symbolizes the amniotic sac breaking, and that desperate rush of the Israelites through the parted waters is the passage through the birth canal into a brand new world.
But the story doesn't just end there, because of course birth isn't an ending, it's a beginning. The Israelites are finally free, but now they are exposed and vulnerable in a way they have never ever been before.
Now that they're outside the womb of Egypt, the Israelites are just like a newborn baby. They are completely and totally vulnerable. They can't feed themselves, they have to rely on manna from heaven, they can't guide themselves, they depend completely on Moses' leadership. This whole time in the wilderness perfectly mirrors the first fragile weeks of a newborn's life, utterly dependent on outside care just to survive.
Which brings us to the final and honestly the most heartbreaking piece of the puzzle. After everything, after leading his people, performing miracles, getting them right to the edge of freedom, Moses is forbidden from entering the promised land. Why? Why would that happen?
And here it is. This is the most stunning conclusion to the metaphor. Moses is the placenta. His entire function was to guide and sustain this developing nation. But just like the placenta, which is absolutely essential for life inside the womb, its purpose ends at the moment of birth. He has to be left behind so that the new life, the nation of Israel, can finally exist on its own.
And suddenly, it all just snaps into focus. When you look through this lens, the epic story of a people's liberation from slavery transforms into the intimate, universal story of every single person's journey. From conception to birth, it's a story of survival against all odds, of development in a hidden world, and of a dramatic, triumphant entry into a new existence.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? When we look closer at these foundational myths, these epic stories that shape our cultures, what other deeply human, universal truths are just sitting there, waiting for us to find them? What other great stories are also our own?